Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk, where you'll hear from successful women who are empowering other women with their stories of adversity, resiliency, and success. And here is your host, Vicki Bradley, founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thanks so much for chiming in today. Take 2 seconds, hit that button to subscribe. Make sure you get the latest and the greatest episodes right into your inbox. So we want that WIL Talk coming in every single week. And today we have an exciting guest. We're going to be talking about how ADHD, addiction, neurodiversity, and leadership might impact your life and recognizing some of those signals. So I'm thrilled to welcome Serena Palmer to the show today. Serena, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Vicki. I'm excited to get into a really rich conversation with you, actually.
Likewise. Well, let me give the audience a little bit of background on you. So Serena Palmer, she is an executive coach, talent strategist, and she's the founder of Serena Consulting. She combines deep global expertise in leadership, career development, and EDI coaching with strategic talent management to drive meaningful change. She draws on her personal journey of a late-stage ADHD diagnosis and overcoming addiction. Serena empowers individuals and organizations to champion neurodiversity, unlock potential, and foster supportive and inclusive cultures. She's also the author of Straight Outta Rehab, a structured program that's designed to guide people on their path to sobriety. And she also is the author of My Two Brains and Me, offering a relatable account of life with ADHD and addiction, accompanied by practical advice for readers. Serena, that's a lot. You've taken on a huge responsibility, and we're thrilled to have you on the show today. So thanks so much for joining me.
Great. Well, it is a lot. And it's always strange when you listen to somebody else introducing you and you feel sort of like, is that really me? A large amount of that, the books, for example, setting up the consultancy, that has all been in the last 2 years. And I'm sure I'll get into the detail of that, but that has really been since I got sober. And since I used that as the biggest change and catalyst to transform my life, where I wanted to just allow my brain to really behave how it wants to behave. And there's no freedom like working for yourself. It's not all fun and games, right? It's very, very stressful, etc., etc. But that really is the point of it. So, understanding my brain and then living with myself, really, for the first time in my entire adult life, diagnosed, treated, and sober. That's really, the biggest transformation that I could go through.
Wow.
And, living with your own brain and learning yourself in that way. I think when I look at the list, I have lots of lists, but when I look at the list of things that I've done in the last 2 years, when I unshackled myself from all the things that I believe to be true, it's just kind of testament really to what, really what living with a neurodiverse brain can bring.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not without its challenges, and it's definitely difficult, but in terms of productivity, I think I'm really out there.
Yes, exactly. I think that's such an important point that you're bringing up. And so, let's dive into, like, how do you think people would describe you before you were diagnosed with ADHD? And then who do they see you as now? Because I think you've hit on something there that's a really important message for people who, whether you've been diagnosed officially or not, it's recognizing those signs and how to use that to your best advantage.
Yeah. That's such an interesting question because, essentially I am the same person. My core characteristics will always be the same. But, if I look at the extreme ends of that scenario before and after, I would say that most, on a professional level, most people would probably talk about my confidence, being outspoken. I think I'm a really high energy person. So I'm a real sort of driving force. And I think they would have used those words, but I will sort of give you a kind of behind the scenes. I am also an expert masker. There is no skill quite like somebody who has really gone through most of their life without a clear understanding as to why they feel the way that they do. And so many late diagnosed individuals will identify with this, is that we become expert mimics. We also, you know, one of the gifts of an ADHD brain is that we are amazing at pattern spotting. So whether that is with people or with scenarios, you know, so we're highly intuitive, you know, all of these things. So therefore, in a heartbeat, we can understand very quickly, you know, the mask that is expected of me now is this, and we put it on. You don't consciously know that you're doing that, right? So I think in a professional setting, that's how people would describe me. I think on the negative side, I think people would say I was, you know, towards the last part of my corporate career, I was extraordinarily stressed. And I would be really volatile in terms of my energy. So I would either be presenting really high energy, full of drive, couldn't seem to do enough, get enough done, you know, and that's quite difficult to work with. You know, I recognize that. And then there's no middle ground. Then it's a complete crash and burn. And, you know, entering into a sort of very low energy, low frequency, feeling very just extremely vulnerable. I could present as the most confident person and be in high drive, high productivity 1 minute. And then when that's burnt out, I would be extremely self-critical, negative, vulnerable, lacking in confidence. And so that polarization, you know, I think people would say that. Where I am now is, you know, in terms of how I come across to the world, I would say professionally, probably less extreme in those things. But here's the real difference, is that the internal monologue has changed completely. So I was outrageously hard and vicious towards myself. So my internal critic, and that, you know, it presents like anxiety. And here's the issue. So many people are just given anti-anxiety or antidepressant drugs, you know, SSRIs. I was on antidepressants for 5 years for no reason. I was never depressed. I was riddled with fear and anxiety, because what sits at the core of that is I never truly understood the rules of anything.
Wow. Okay.
And so, you know, this is what I try to use analogies that people can identify with, but it's like the suspicion that every other human being understands the terms and conditions and the rules of every scenario, whether that is how to go to the supermarket and do your shopping, through to how to run a team, how to be a mother, how to do X, Y, it doesn't matter. I never knew what those rules were, and there aren't any, right? But there are some unspoken conditions of society that is what gives that, I guess, that suspicion that we just don't get it. And so that has been a lifetime of feeling like that, always just slightly on the edge. And because I was different, I was either held up and sort of, look at this, you know, this shiny object, or it was sort of pointed and laughed at. And kind of, you know, like, I can't believe she didn't know that, you know, the fundamentals of how to write, I don't know, how to write a check, or how to, you know, that they're things that most people would probably never consider. And that's what it is like being undiagnosed and neurodivergent and not knowing.
Right.
So I think that's probably the biggest thing. You know, where I am now is I have had to fake it till you make it. And that's been part of my recovery and sobriety, but also my huge dedication to understanding ADHD brains. And so I had to pretend to be kind to myself for a while. And now I am kind to myself.
Interesting.
And I'm gentle. Yeah.
So how did you, like, what was that moment where you were able to flip that to not just pretending to be kind, but actually embracing that kindness for yourself?
Yeah. I think it was creating habits that I really enjoyed. So part of my story is that, I was holding a big corporate job. I was a global director, and I was also an alcoholic and completely unaware of that.
Mm.
Which sounds ridiculous again, but that's the nature of addiction. You see, addiction's job is to trick you and to keep you, it wants you to keep drinking. And for me, alcohol was the issue. But, I didn't look like an alcoholic as I perceived alcoholics to look. I wasn't hiding vodka and having it on my cereal for breakfast. I was a binge drinker, and isn't everybody? So that's where I was coming from, and my journey took me into a complete sort of crash out. There was no. It got to the point with alcohol that there was no choice. I had to go and seek help, and so I checked into a rehab for a month. And in that rehab, I will forever be eternally grateful for the people there, both the inmates, as I like to call them, as well as the wonderful staff, because they structure your day in such a way that there is no real free time. There is a set routine every day. You're up at a certain time. They make sure that you eat at certain times, and they introduce morning gratitudes. And Vicky, that for me, it sounds like old me used to sort of want to vomit when people talked about yoga or meditation or gratitude. I used to loathe people like that.
Mm.
And I think that is because I was so ill. When we detest people for no real logical reason, purely because they're happy, or the word peace for me was like a sort of a swear word.
Right.
Daily gratitudes in rehab starts to chip away at how your day goes. And you can find anything. And believe me, that was my lowest point. My self-worth was zero. I hated myself on a scale that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And so to find things to be grateful for when you feel so horrific, you can just start with, I am grateful I'm wearing socks, or I'm grateful that I have a bed to sleep in. I'm grateful that there's food in front of me, or whatever it may be. And just doing that every single day has an accumulative effect on your mindset. And it's fundamental. And so when I left rehab, I continued that. And that's why I wrote Straight Out of Rehab, because I couldn't find the framework that we were given every morning on a piece of paper. It didn't exist. And every gratitude journal I found on Amazon or wherever was so generic. It wasn't designed for alcoholics and addicts.
Mm.
I needed real prompts that were going to get me to where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean about fake it. I just made that the thing that it took 2 minutes every day. And sometimes I would draw things, and sometimes I would just do one or two because I was in a really foul temper. But most days, the practice of that, and I think the accumulative effect is that you start to realize and believe it.
Yeah.
And that's where everything opens up. When you really truly see the world, in the depths of addiction, you don't see or hear the world. Addiction is innately selfish. The addict brain is me, I, and you're closed.
Mm-hmm.
When that is changed, you see everything differently. And the way I talk to myself has really been the thing that I'm most grateful for now, and that I can help other people with, because it's alarming how horrible we are to ourselves. And I think that's common for all humans. I think if you are neurodiverse and addicted, it's off the charts.
Yeah.
And it's really.
I was going to ask you that because, I coach a lot of women, I coach men, and I hear people, all the time saying things to themselves that is not compassionate. We're compassionate with everybody else except for ourselves. And so I can only imagine with a neurodivergent mind, how that plays out. And so those stories even that you tell yourself, right? Or to your point with the addiction, you're not even telling yourself because you're not even aware that it is an addiction. So the practice of gratitude, that mindset shift, like from your perspective, Serena, is there like, I'm not sure how I want to ask this, but where my head is like, okay, so everybody should be practicing gratitude, right?
Yeah.
And, when you talked about it being compounding, like the more you do it, that's true
Yeah.
for anyone, right?
Anyone.
Somebody
Yeah.
who has a neurodivergent brain, it might take longer, but it's building the consistency of the habit, is what I'm hearing. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. I'd say absolutely yes. Everybody. I wish the principles of recovery were just the principles of life for
Mm,
everyone. Because, getting sober and not drinking is only, it sounds like sort of, it doesn't make sense, right? But that's only one part
mhm,
of recovery. The rest of it is learning how to live life on life's terms.
mhm,
And that there's so many core principles to that. I would say for a neurodivergent individual, particularly an ADHD, absolutely consistency is the thing. However, I'll throw this in. We get really bored, and it's so, we can be so into something and repeat and repeat and repeat it. So I'm like this with music. I will hear a song I love and I will listen to that song as many times as I can every day until one day I hate it.
mm.
And then it's dead. That song is now gone and can't be listened to ever again. Maybe a sort of 5-year period needs to pass. So here's the issue with consistency. It's consistency to show and exercise gratitude, but you don't have to do it in the same way. So
Okay.
introducing freedom to chop and change it as long as you are still engaging with gratitude. So an example of that is, an absolute killer for an ADHD individual is to create a schedule. And
Mm,
this has happened to me a lot through my whole life. But, really well-meaning people, my mum, dear friends, lovely, wonderful, loving people will sort of see crash and burn moments from me where I'm sort of, I haven't washed now for a week and, I can't seem to get the engine started. And they will swoop in and say, let's do a schedule, get up between 6 and 7 and do this, and that goes up on the wall. The issue with that is you will fail on one of those things. And as soon as I fail on one thing, I failed the whole lot. And so if I'm 5 minutes late on the schedule, the whole thing's done.
fascinating. Okay. So
Yeah.
how do you get yourself then back on track? Because I think that's a very real situation. I shared with you just before we started on the podcast, like both my kids are ADHD. And so, yeah, it is kind of an all or nothing, right? So how do you get yourself back on the schedule when you fall off?
Yeah. So I have a few different like neuro hacks to this, and they purely come from my own experimentation with my own self.
Mhm.
Because there's nothing worse than the cycle of, oh my God, I failed to do the thing, and now I'm going to hate myself for and it just goes, it's a sort of downward spiral. So to try to avoid that, rather than a schedule, create a menu. This is what I would suggest.
Create a menu.
So a
Okay.
menu. Okay. So if an issue for me is intense, very long, hyper focused periods, and they can go on for a week. So if I am extremely engaged in something, so launching my business is a really extreme scenario. I gave myself, all me, I don't have a boss. I gave myself a time and a date that I wanted to have my website up. I was going to launch this. I was going to make announcements. All of this driven by me. I can change it at any time. That question never occurs to me. I am so driven to do what I set out to do because I'm deeply interested, I'm passionate, all of those things. But that created a 5-day period where I barely left my laptop. I didn't wash for a week. I don't think I really ate anything. I was averaging 3 hours sleep a night, and that leads to a crash.
Of course. Yeah. Just not
So
even having the sleep itself is a crash.
yeah, an insanity. You
Mhm.
start to lose the plot. And what's going on there, by the way, chemically, is that this is so ADHDers have less access to dopamine.
Mhm.
Um, and we process dopamine differently. So when we get it big time. And it's like, whoa, we want more of that. We can fake those chemical feelings with cortisol, high stress.
Mhm.
So if you put yourself in high stress situations all the time, there is a synergy between the feeling of that and also a dopamine hit.
Mm.
So there is a chemical reason what's going on. So when that all runs out and you're depleted of everything, that is unsustainable. And that's not how I wanted to start my business. And I knew I was doing it, but I couldn't stop it because it's a feeling of achievement. And I'm so interested. So the menu hack comes from something a coach I had years ago talked about, with specific interventions to do with just physically being okay. So forgetting to eat, forgetting to drink water is so common for ADHDers. But if you put one of those big jugs, the cups that you drink and you've got the lines, it's too much. So tapping into my brain, what I find interesting are funny words. And they're not really funny to anyone else, but I find words fascinating and amusing. So
Okay.
on my menu was take a sip of water. So it's so small and achievable, and the word sip makes me laugh. I don't know why. I just find it funny. The fact that I have to have a poster in front of me that has things like have a sip of water. Something I need to do is to stare into space, and the best place to do that is outside in nature. So
Mhm.
if I can only just get to my garden, okay, that's fine. If I can go up to the woods, even better. So another thing on my menu is stare at nature, and I literally just stare. But what's happening is that my brain is sorting and filing and organizing, and I look like I've sort of, been unplugged. And this is what I got told off for as a child. I was
Mm.
called Serena the Dreamer. That was my name,
Ah,
at
really?
school. And, that daydreaming is your brain processing and creating, and it has to be allowed. So just giving permission on my menu, go and stare at
Mm.
nature, is another thing.
Mm.
So creating a menu, which by the way, I rip up and change. I color them in. Sometimes I just write them straight like this. And then the ones that aren't interesting to look at, I notice that I don't do them.
Okay. Okay.
So, you have to experiment with these things, but coming up with little ways in which that you can, in a fun way that is all about permission.
Mhm.
So for late diagnosed individuals, we don't believe we have permission for anything.
Well, you've been conditioned, right? I mean,
Right.
even with society, with school, with, all the things that, like, even just the comment you made about Serena the Dreamer, right? Like, that's putting a label on you, that you're checked out and you're in your own little world that conditions you even as you go into adulthood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Daydreaming is bad. That's the message.
that is
Don't
the
daydream.
message.
Stop daydreaming. I don't know how many times I was told that at school. I was always staring off into space because I'd heard something that I thought, and then I have to go and have a thought about it. And,
Mm.
but that's stop daydreaming. And daydreaming is you're too dreamy. That was just all the way through my life, my
Mhm.
childhood, etc. Now I love it. And now I look at my menu and think, I'm going to do at least 3 stare into natures this morning before I even that's because I'm in the mood. I've got a lot of thoughts. If I don't do that, it starts to feel panicky
Mhm.
that I haven't processed things.
Hmm. Well, that's fascinating. I mean, for all of us, you need that space to be able to, like, either process something, as you said, or create something. Like, I find even for myself, when I take that time for space, that's usually when the best ideas come, right? And so having that Like I actually like the menu idea. I think that's very clever, more so than a to-do list.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Serena, like, I mean, one thing I notice, like, I have a lot of people in my life that are, they have neurodiversity different in different forms. But I see a lot of creativity, like a lot of creativity. I think what I notice, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, I notice where they have ideas and they're really great at starting the ideas, but then they get bored. And you talked about getting bored, right? So how do you help someone navigate that, especially in
Yeah,
the working world, right?
yeah, yeah. It's there's a lot of misconceptions around this. I would say, generally speaking, how what you've described is true for most ADHDers. That is, if you really nail it down, the idea generation comes from, if you remember anything about an ADHD brain and how it prioritizes, it will always be interest over importance,
Okay.
always. And there are emotional attachments to tasks
Mm,
for all of us. So we can use that to, again, hack the system. So speed is often important for things that we don't want to do.
okay.
So if, and I think this is true of everybody, if there is something you don't want to do, you're inclined to put it off,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So but let's take the one that we all have to do and is horrific. You're going to have to ring the bank, right?
Mm,
And you're going to get put on hold, and you're going to have to listen to the music, and then you're going to explain yourself to five people, and they're going to keep moving you.
yeah.
We know
Torture.
what's going to happen. Yeah, yeah. So we don't want to do it, right? So the thing with completing or doing a thing that we don't want to do is not that we can't do it, it's that finding a way to make it more interesting or give you a sense of achievement, dopamine hit quickly. So, for example, I coach a lot of, so I'm an executive coach, and unsurprisingly, a lot of my coaching clients are ADHDs. So I always give them a framework and say, take this away and experiment with it, because you're going to have to make it your own. If it doesn't work for you, just forget it. So, an idea around speed and sense of achievement is to do a really quick brainstorm. So, let's take the bank phone call. What is it that I'm thinking and dreading and know that I'm going to have to do? So I'm going to have to actually dial the number. So you take a blank piece of paper and just write every component part of this task. So I'm going to have to dial the number. I'm likely going to sit on hold. That's going to drive me nuts. I'm going to explain myself 5 times. I'm then going to have to ask a horrible question. I'm then going to have to talk about list, but do it in a scattered way. And to do that, set a timer. So a number between 1 and 10 that you're tuned into. So for me in my life, I don't know why, it's always 4 or 7. I think everything's going to take 4 or 7 minutes.
Okay.
It never does. But for this task, you can pick 4 minutes, 7 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever. Set the timer. In that time, write everything you think and feel about that task. Once you've done that, put the pen down, 3 different colors. One that is associated with, actually, there is a part of this that I'm really quite going to enjoy. It could be you're going to complain and tell somebody off. I might enjoy doing that today. Circle that green. Green is good. The ones you have no emotional attachment to, amber or orange or whatever. Choose any color. We don't care about those. They just are. The ones that are really gonna make you suffer, circle those in red. And then you use those 3 colors and you think, right, if I can get 2 of the meh and 1 of the red horrible ones done, I'll reward myself with a green one. Do you see what I'm saying? So you can use that, you break it down, the whole thing doesn't look as terrible. You can do it in 4 minutes preparation, you associate an emotion to it, and hopefully that is fun. So this is where a lot of us find fun. It's quite fun to break something down into, and you can swear, you can write whatever you want, right? No one's looking at it. You can say I effing, but whatever it is, that's quite funny. So and then it's lighter. We know it's all these component parts, and we can reward ourselves and get it done quick.
Okay.
That's one of the things that I use for all sorts of different things.
No, that's actually really smart. That's a great hack for anybody, right? Especially when it's the things that you don't like to do. Because you're right, we avoid those at all costs. I mean, I'll pile those things up on the side of my desk because I just don't want to have to deal with it. My brain goes to, well, if I'm really procrastinating on this, how important is it? Do I actually need to do it? Right.
Yeah.
And then I'll go through the rationalization of that. What strengths has ADHD given you that you like to celebrate instead of seeing it as something that is a negative or a flaw or, bad?
Yeah. I think for me, where I am at the moment is just I have such an ability to learn.
Mm.
That sounds like a really egotistical, arrogant thing to say, and it's kind of
Not at all.
uncomfortable. I find, we're not very nice. We don't compliment ourselves, particularly British people, right? We're always terribly,
Critical.
self-deprecating, or anyway, what I have learned and I celebrate every day in some way is I learn things fast
Mm.
and in depth. So this is something that is so joyous for me, because academically I believed I was stupid my whole life. So, in my school years, the teachers would say, if only she could apply herself, and I have real issues with numbers and maths. I don't retain information around numbers well.
Mhm.
And it takes huge effort for me to sort of work out, is there really a difference between 10,000 and 10 million? Because in my brain, it's just there's a 10 and lots of zeros. Does it
Mhm.
really matter? Later in life, that does matter, right?
Definitely.
But, the overarching message was, she's creative, she's artsy. I ended up
Mm.
going to drama school. I didn't go to university. And my family's narrative was always, well, she's not academic. Thought that meant I wasn't good at learning, because in my view, society expects us to learn and we only value certain subjects.
Mhm.
So we value people who can learn and then regurgitate information on an exam
Mhm.
for maths and science and English, etc. But there was no value when in my childhood with anything that was creative. And there was certainly no recognition about different learning styles. And so I truly believed I wasn't able to learn. And I have proven that to be not true my whole career, but I never really believed it. But since going out on my own in the last 2 years, I've had to learn everything. And it's not that I'm good at it, I enjoy it.
Mhm.
And I can learn at huge depths
Mhm.
and gain insight and knowledge. And that to me is truly a joy. It's a real celebration of what I had repressed my whole life, is that don't try and learn those things. You're going to have to pretend you've learned it, or and that wasn't true.
Mhm.
So I really, I do celebrate that. And
Good for you.
it's quite a shift, it's feeling that, I don't really believe there isn't anything you can't learn.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I think our society, whether it be at school or communities, often people just don't realize the messaging that is shared, how it shapes people's thinking of themselves. Like having that one conversation of, Serena's not really that good with math. Then Serena spends her whole life saying, I'm really not that good at math, right? When the reality of it is you might be very good, right?
Yeah.
And, that what you were talking about, those, the hacks earlier, I think those hacks are so important to start to shift the mindset and telling yourself, what you are capable of, not what you're not capable of, right? Like that plays such an important role in how we show up. One of my really close friends, she's very ADHD, like extreme, but she processes information like nobody's business. Like I sit back, I mean, I'm fast, but I sit back and I go, wow, like it's fascinating how quickly, and to your point about the depth, like she was with me at an event last night and she was like spouting off things that I was just like, how does your brain even retain all that? Right. Like, because I think my brain's gotten slower, but it's fascinating, right? To your point of how you make those shifts and you're using that to your advantage and to, enable you to better serve those that you're working with in recognizing the depth of what you can take in and learn from. Yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
absolutely. It's all down to, if you look at brain scans, and this is always where if anyone's newly diagnosed, start there. Anyone I work with on a coaching capacity or wherever I encounter them, any new diagnosed ADHDers, start with the medical scientific difference. And it's really good to start with some brain scans.
Mm-hmm.
There's some really good, reputable, good source information out there. Look at images of brains between a neurodiverse and a neurotypical brain and how they light up differently. And this is how we understand the pattern recognition, which is also connected to all of our senses, by the way. So it's intellectual, but it's also intuitive. Once we see the patterns, we are fascinated.
Mm-hmm.
And we can now quickly gain that information. So that's where the frustration around some of the narrative about ADHD is out there. There's a lot on social media. There's some great stuff, there's some hilarious stuff, and there's some really unhelpful stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
And the
very
sort of
true.
narrative, the ADHDers are just all about the fun or the shiny things, and that, they can't, it couldn't be more untrue.
Well,
It's
that's a good myth buster right there. So,
yeah.
what message would you want to give women listening who suspect they may have ADHD, right? Or if they're navigating addiction, right? And they haven't been able to name it yet. Like what advice would you give them?
Strangely, it's the same piece of advice for both things.
Okay.
If you're listening and observing things that people are talking about that you think resonate with you from an ADHD perspective, and equally, if you are resonating with people who are talking about addiction and alcoholism or whatever addiction it may be, it's the same thing. The best place to start is with somebody who is in the same seat but has moved over the line into either diagnosis and understanding and knowledge gaining for ADHD, or an addict who has gone over the line into recovery. Because it takes one to know one. And, the power of recovery is being able to connect with other people who understand without you saying a word exactly what you're feeling and have walked in your shoes. And that is, I think it's one of the biggest roadblocks we have in society, is that we don't talk about addiction. It's still a really dirty, sort of swept under the carpet thing. It's riddled with shame.
Yeah, there's a lot of stigma.
Shame kills people.
Yeah.
Shame will kill people. And sadly, I've lost a lot of people that I've met in recovery land. And at the core of it is the shame. And so finding a safe place to talk about it or to share your concerns or whatever it might be, going to someone who has experienced that and has learnt the tools of recovery and is able to identify with you. You know, for me, it was the most powerful thing. I didn't know that I was an alcoholic, which is ridiculous considering where my drinking took me. But I also didn't know that there could be a life that was livable sober.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the choice would have to be, if you stop drinking, then you're going to have to lead a bloody miserable life. And in fact, the opposite is true. But I wasn't able to learn that until I met other people who had walked in my shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with ADHD. You know, go to the reliable sources, steer away from online. You know, by the way, I'll always say this: if anyone's Googling, "Am I an alcoholic?" that's your sign to go and get help.
Yeah. Great comment. So just last thing before we wrap up here, what is the one truth about neurodiversity you wish everyone could understand?
That's the hardest question in the world, because there's like
Save the best for last.
Yeah. Because there's so many things. What's the one thing about neurodiverse minds that I wish everybody understood? I wish everybody understood the unshackling from rules that are unnecessary for everybody, but particularly for our neurospicy folks out there. Allowing freedom creates brilliance.
Wow.
You know, it's that in a nutshell. If I could try and boil it down, it's strip away the things that are just unnecessary. If that's at work or in life, you know, this is not about bad behavior and excuses for people behaving badly. It's none of that. You know, we're all accountable. I'm accountable for myself, you know, if I behave badly or not. But where life gets really hard is being boxed in unnecessarily. And I think that's the real tragedy of it, is we're just stunting so much brilliance that we can all benefit.
Wow. Very powerful. That's a great way to wrap up the episode today, Serena. Wow. Yeah, I love that. And my head went to a lot of places when you said that. So where can people find you? I mean, we have, a lot of people in the world that are navigating and a lot celebrating, but if they have more questions about their walking with regards to neurodiversity or addiction, how do they find Serena?
Well, I'm all over the place, Vicky, obviously. So, I've there's a YouTube channel out there that I've done a few things and forgotten about, but I'd say the most reliable source is my website, which is www.serena.consulting. Otherwise, it's LinkedIn. Serena Consulting's on Facebook as well. So pretty much any channel that you think is out there, I will have opened an account and forgotten about it. But I'm most consistently, obviously, my website or my LinkedIn profile. Yeah.
Amazing. Serena, thank you so much. Great conversation. Thank you for sharing. I think that also is part of the recovery, is also being vulnerable and sharing the path that you've been on. And it gives permission for other people to share the journey that they're headed on or that they're on already. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for doing that. That takes a lot of bravery.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
So audience, thank you. Listen to this episode. If this resonates with you and you have somebody who would benefit from hearing the episode, please do share it. Reach out to Serena if you have questions. If you can't reach her, reach out to me. We're here for you. So make sure you take advantage of that. And just to, further that, if you have questions about your leadership, visit us at Women in Leadership Empowered. We have a free leadership quiz on there that will help you understand a little bit how you're showing up in the world. So be sure to take advantage of that. We look forward to seeing you on the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. So take care, everyone, and have a brilliant day. Serena, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for WIL Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. To learn more about our programs, please visit www.wilempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.